Hi, I'm Russell Redding, Secretary of Agriculture, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
Wow, Secretary Redding, thank you so much for getting our show started for us today.
A pleasure. Great to see you, Eric. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Harlock, and we've got a great show for you today. On last week's show, I mentioned that there are some changes in the Pennsylvania hemp program. Today, we're going to talk to Shannon Powers from the Department of Ag and find out what those changes are and how they're going to affect you. Then we're going to talk harvesting equipment with Peter Duchamp from Forever Green up there in British Columbia, Canada. So we're going to hear about the KP4 hemp cutter in a little more detail and find out what it's like to grow hemp in British Columbia. I've got a couple of nuggets of hemp news, we've got some sponsor messages, and then we're going to get into the calls with Shannon and Peter. Here we go. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. This episode is brought to you in part by the National Hemp Association. The NHA is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. that advocates for sensible public policy and regulation. The NHA is dedicated to building a sustainable future and promoting economic development in rural communities. Become a member today and join a thriving community of people with a passion for all things hemp. Learn more at nationalhempassociation.org. Okay, welcome back. Just a couple of news nuggets here for you today. This first one comes to us from Kansas, and it's got some familiar names in it. So the story says that South Bend Industrial Hemp is launching an apprenticeship program for 2 positions through Kansas Farm Bureau's award-winning Rural Kansas Apprenticeship Program. The program is designed to provide training and technical instruction to employees hired into specific operations positions. Apprentices will be recruited, interviewed, hired, and employed by South Bend Industrial Hemp, and you can contact the company for more information about their hemp processing facility operator apprenticeship at southbendindustrialhemp.com. Yeah, all right, I've been out there to their facility in Kansas. Melissa Nelson Baldwin and the Baldwin family, great people doing great work out there in Kansas. So happy to share this, and I hope you get some great candidates. Speaking of new positions, I'm excited to tell you that Lancaster Farming has hired a production assistant for me here on the podcast. So in a couple of weeks, I will be getting some much needed help in putting this show together. So more information on that exciting development when it becomes available. This next story, this is exciting. I'm reading this on constructionequipmentguide.com, and the headline says, hemp-based batteries to be manufactured in Wisconsin. Wisconsin Battery Company announced the acquisition of 17 acres in Portage, Wisconsin, where it will build a new manufacturing plant to develop hemp carbon batteries as an alternative for lithium-ion batteries. Yeah, Wisconsin Battery Company focuses on research, development, and manufacturing of clean, renewable energy storage alternatives. So, all right, we're going to be following this story. So that's exciting. All right, I'll have the links to this story and that apprenticeship opportunity on the show page for this episode, along with everything else. So check us out there at lancasterfarming.com. Okay, so continuing with our theme of good news, we're going to now talk about the changes to the Pennsylvania hemp program, which I'm going to put them safely in the good news category. I think this is great news for growers here. So now we're going to talk to Shannon Powers from the Department of Agriculture and find out what the deal is. Okay, here we go. Shannon Powers, Press Secretary from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Welcome back to the Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great. Happy to talk to you, Eric.
Yeah, likewise. So I invited you here today because I hear there are some pretty interesting changes in the Pennsylvania hemp program. And I wondered if you can just sort of lay it out for us. What can growers expect this year? What do they need to know? That sort of thing. What are the changes?
So there are two major changes for 2024. The first is that Pennsylvania is moving to a performance-based testing system for growers who are growing either for fiber or grain. So, and then that's one. The second one is permit applications are year-round now rather than an April 1st deadline.
Okay.
And that's in recognition of the fact that we're finding that folks can grow 2 crops of hemp in one season.
Right.
So this better helps them do that.
Good.
This accommodates growers who want to, maybe they don't figure it out early enough in the year, but they want to put in a second crop of hemp.
Actually, that reminds me, the farmer out in Central PA, Herb Grove, last year he was wishing that he could put in, a new, a few acres of hemp later on, cause after they figure it out, it's kind of like sometimes they sort of make it up as they go. So this rule change is going to be great for farmers like Herb. So
yeah, we're listening to the growers' voices and their need.
Yeah. With the performance-based testing, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like or how that will work?
Sure. Performance-based sampling will reduce the testing that's required for growers every year. So to meet the requirements, they have to do less sampling. We'll still do the random audits. So that's on a percentage of fields that are sort of randomly tested. That's not going away.
Okay.
But for those who are growing fiber and grain, they're eligible if they meet 4 basic requirements. One's they've grown compliant hemp, so they followed the rules for 2 consecutive seasons.
Okay. 2,
they've completed all of the sampling requirements. Sounds like one rule, but I guess it's 2.
Okay.
3, they're not currently under any corrective action plan. So we haven't had issues with their crops prior years. And then 4, they're growing a fiber or hemp variety that has been certified by a seed certifying agency or is included on our list of low risk hemp varieties. And that list is on our website.
Okay.
As well as all these requirements. So you don't have to remember what I said.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I'll have a link to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's hemp page on the show page for this episode. Can you talk about other additional resources that are available to hemp farmers or farmers in general, things that, like money available or grant opportunities or, what other great resources are available through the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture?
So that's a really great question. Now, one, we from the get-go, we convened this PA Hemp Steering Committee, and that is an excellent research source to go to for information, for connecting with people who, you can vet your ideas through. You can maybe connect with a processor. So the Hemp Steering Committee is one resource, but through the PA Farm Bill, there is funding available, including, so there's planning money available, farm vitality grants, and many of those have gone to farmers who they're planning what they can do to sustain their farming operation in the future. They want to innovate. They want to, have some variety to hedge against market downturns in one area. So you can get reimbursed $7,500 for your plans to innovate on your farm. There's a farm vitality grant. There are all kinds of other funding options available, especially crop block grants. The state specialty crop block grants, we started those specifically because some of the areas like hemp, some of the crops like hemp were not eligible under the federal funding structure. So now the federal government, especially with the new census, is recognizing hemp as a crop and measuring it. And that actually, we're excited about that because that gives it validity for people who are looking to invest in hemp, say set up a processing shop, hire you to grow hemp for them.
Right.
anyway, we're excited about things that are happening there. But all of those funding opportunities, whether you want to improve the soil and water on your farm and you need some help purchasing equipment for conservation, all of that is available on the website. There's a funding page now where all of the grants and funding are in one place. And
Okay,
that's
great.
through the Agriculture Business Development Center.
Okay. I will find that link and I will put it on the show page for this episode too. And with that grant money, you have to be, what, a resident of Pennsylvania?
You do have to be in Pennsylvania for
Okay.
farm vitality grants. You just have to be, you have to apply. It's a reimbursement grant. So what
Okay.
you're doing is, you're telling us what kind of expertise that you need, whether it's a conservation plan, whether you need a financial analyst to say, is this crop feasible for me? Here's what I have. So you submit your plan. We reimburse up to $7,500 of that plan. And it can be, financial planning. It can be whatever business planning you need to diversify or to transfer your farm to the next generation, or, whatever. There's a lot of funding available.
Excellent.
Other grants, pools of money as well, especially for conservation. And we know, hemp is a great crop for adding into your conservation plan. To restore, for soil restoration, that kind of thing, for cover cropping.
Excellent. How about is there any grant money or opportunities for people who want to bring like processing capacity here to Pennsylvania?
I'm glad you asked that question. The grant money is not yet available, but it's proposed in Governor Shapiro's proposed budget plan. There is a $10.3 million Ag Innovation Fund. There is the one that's really exciting for this purpose is the PA sites. It's to create shovel-ready sites so that an investor knows that they can come into Pennsylvania and set up shop and everything is ready to go. So they don't have to build the infrastructure they need in order to, delay their project by years while it gets ready. It's to develop shovel-ready sites. And that's a $500 million proposed fund that is proposed in DCED's, the Department of Community and Economic Development's budget, not in the Ag budget.
Okay.
The innovation funding, that $10 million, that is in Ag's budget, in Ag's proposed budget. There's $20 million because we know, we funded upwards of $1.2 million in research and development to date in hemp specifically, but we know it's a great tool for innovating. There's a lot there. So there's a $20 million that leverages additional research funding. That's in the proposed budget. And then a regional $3.5 million to launch a regional competitiveness challenge.
Okay.
So there's a lot of funding that is expanding opportunities for Pennsylvania farmers specifically, not just in hemp, but in other areas.
Yep.
Combine hemp with other things that you're growing.
And so this is a proposed budget. It still has to get passed by the House here in the state?
Got to get through the General Assembly, but it is a proposed budget. It seems to be, it's been received well so far. So just got to see how that goes.
And then that would be July 1st? Is that when that fiscal year would start, when that budget would start?
Yes, that budget would start July 1st. So the process of sort of negotiating that is going on right now with hearings, appropriation committee hearings, where Secretary Redding will be grilled on exactly what does this mean.
And I'm sure we will be covering all of that in the pages of Lancaster Farming. I know my colleague Phil Gruber will be all over it. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Well, I wonder if you could talk about sort of like the general commitment to the hemp industry or the bio-ag industry in general here in Pennsylvania.
The general commitment is rolled into the fact that we have a governor now who's recognizing how important agriculture is to our economy, to opportunities in rural communities, to families. And so some of that funding, we've already had this sort of historic PA Farm Bill funding that recognizes what we need to move forward and what we need to grow. This expands on that so much in the governor's 10-year economic development plan. Agriculture is front and center as here's an opportunity that we want to feed. We recognize how critical this is to, growing as a Commonwealth, growing our economy overall. So there's a lot of excitement around the governor's budget proposal and around this 10-year economic development strategy. That's
cool.
The first one we've had in 20 years.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, Governor Shapiro, he fixed that bridge in like 2 days single-handedly. So I think we're all big fans of Governor Shapiro. So
yeah, there's so much there that's for innovation in energy and conservation, and so it's a general commitment to moving forward to addressing things like climate change and sustainable energy development, and moving towards an economy that's more dependent on something other than fossil fuels.
That's great. There's so much sort of positive movement here in Pennsylvania. We've got a lot of, sort of like success stories in the hemp industry. I'm thinking, right now of Cameron and Melissa at Americhon Cast Hemp. They were just awarded a grant from the U.S. Army. We've got the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council doing some neat things around and bringing investors in. It just feels like a good time to be in Pennsylvania in agriculture in hemp.
Yeah, and the hemp engine as well.
Right.
The group that's they're producing more research to support the validity of hemp.
Yeah.
As a solution to all of these problems that are huge that are facing us in the future.
Right. Yeah. And they got like $1 million from the National Science Foundation. So yeah, a lot of good stuff happening here. And I appreciate, your department's help in all of this. Couldn't really do it without the Department of Agriculture. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listening audience about what y'all are doing there in Harrisburg?
Nope. Just, there are a lot of resources at agriculture.pa.gov/hemp. A lot of stuff there to take in as far as, it can take you off in funding directions, finding partners like at the Hemp Steering Committee, finding folks who can give you what you need to make business decisions and sustain your farm.
Okay, Shannon Powers, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, there you go. Some exciting changes to the Pennsylvania Hemp Program. If you want more information, like she said, go to the Department of Agriculture's website, and you can get it all there. If you need help finding that website, just go to lancasterfarming.com, find the show page for this episode, and you can click on the link. All right, so now we're going to go talk to Peter Duchop from Forever Green. I met Peter in person last summer up in Montana. He was there with the KP4 hemp cutter out in a 500-acre field of fiber hemp, and he was, demonstrating how this machine knocks down that hemp. So over the past few weeks, you may have noticed a sponsor message from the KP4 hemp cutter folks. And so now we're going to find out more about Forever Green and Peter Duchop and the KP4 hemp cutter. All right, here we go. Peter Duchop from Forever Green. Welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, great. Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate you having me. Really excited to be on this podcast with you today.
Yeah, cool. Well, we first met each other out at the Montana Hemp Summit last summer out there in Fort Benton, Montana. And you are the owner-operator of Forever Green. So why don't you just sort of give us a basic introduction?
Yeah. So again, my name is Peter Duchop, Forever Green, owner-operator. We're in British Columbia, Canada. We've hemp was a twinkle in our eye in about 2010, got a little more serious in 2015, and we're here now today, basically selling and distributing the KP4 hemp cutter. That's sort of our main stay these days, but our background sort of evolved and still takes place in the processing side. So we've really had to start from the ground up. From when we started, there really was not a lot of resources except for a lot of grain being grown in Canada. So we kind of just saw that there was a lot of waste material in that grain crop that should be better utilized, and full plant utilization was sort of the mainstay. So we kind of just forged ahead down that path, and I guess the blessing over time is that we've really been involved from everything from putting seed in the ground to building our own pilot plant for processing. So now coming to this cutter, we just see all the advantages along the way, because we firmly believe that processing starts in the field and not necessarily at the mill. So
Okay.
yeah, we can just speak to it a lot, and I think we've helped a few farmers out along the way just with ideas and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about that KP4 hemp cutter. Just tell me who makes it, and then let's describe it, and sort of let's get a picture in our minds of what this thing looks like.
Yeah, so basically it's a multi-tiered sickle bar. So it's got 4 cutting bars on it, and it's made by a company called Lemetris. They're a family-run business, which is also fantastic. They're just very receptive to ideas, and just always improving and always wanting to do a better job. They've been around since the early 90s, making a lot of heavy tillage equipment and different ag supplies. So
And they're a European company?
they are a European company, yeah. They're out of Lithuania,
Oh,
and
okay.
we partnered up with them in 2019, based on some experience we had in harvesting our crops. We started with a self-propelled combine harvester with a Kemper header that many will probably recognize. And the problem with the self-propelled is it's a whole beast on its own. So there's a million things that can go wrong. So we had this particular cutter come over from the Netherlands in 98, and we are the 3rd owners that we just happened to find this thing in a barn. But it was getting a little bit old, and we were starting to have to make custom parts, and we just couldn't keep it going, and didn't have the I guess confidence that we could take on more acres with it without being stuck. And
Okay.
the worst thing during harvest season is seeing a big crop of hemp and being stuck with trying to get it off the field. So, but it did teach us a lot of things as far as having the hemp sort of pre-cut into sort of determinate lengths, so you can actually do a lot better job in baling and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It also did another thing that we didn't like, which was put it into windrow. So it's our opinion that basically you need to have this crop flat on the ground so you can get an even ret on it. And having this sort of pre-cut allows you to be able to turn it with tedders and rakes and just do a better job baling. But as far as the cutter itself, yeah, it's 4 cutting bars set about 2 feet apart from each other. And the whole idea is basically to make the crop manageable and sort of improve consistency and repeatability, from season to season, from field to field. And like I said before, processing really starts in the field, not at the mill. Yeah.
So, how did you first connect with Lemetris?
So when we were having issues with our self-propelled, we were contemplating what we were going to do next. We had seen some university in the UK was developing a multi-tiered cutter, but they were wanting just an exorbitant amount of money for it, and just honestly fluked out. Lemetris had basically dropped a video a month earlier with this multi-tiered cutter. I called them up at 1 a.m. and sent them a check half an hour later, and basically the relationship just sort of blossomed from there. They really liked the experience that we've had with growing hemp, being in the industry for as long as we have, seeing it mature, and we wanted to give it a try. And as soon as we tried it, it was just a total game changer for our whole on-field crop management. Everything just went so much smoother, and things worked. I wasn't cutting 20 acres and spending 21 hours underneath a baler or something like that, which was some of our previous early days.
Yeah.
and yeah, everything just flowed,
Okay.
once this crop is cut to that sort of manageable length, now you're allowing conventional equipment to come in behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just such a game changer. Like, we get phone calls all the time with people saying they got stuck, their disc vine or whatever mechan or tool they decided to use wasn't working, or they were having issues with it. And, we've gone through all those pain points already. So I guess maybe we see the reasoning behind this. So sometimes it's hard to convince people that, this is a better way because they haven't really been burned yet, I guess, and gone
Right.
through the pain. So usually it's after year one that we get a phone call and an order. So
All right, there you go.
yeah,
All right, so you said there's four sickle bar blades. They're
that's
about
right.
2 foot apart.
Yeah.
So what's the highest you're cutting then? I guess to 8 foot, 10 foot. Where
Yeah,
you at?
you have some adjustment in the back end and obviously on your 2 point on
Oh,
the
okay.
tractor. So, call it roughly 8 feet. The reality is we're usually targeting like we're trying to target a 14-foot plant for our own operation.
Okay.
It might be somewhere between 12 and 14.
Sure.
But what you end up doing, even if you have a bit of a taller chunk at the top, because it's sort of the more spindly part of the plant, it doesn't cause you any grief.
Okay.
It's really that main base of the plant that causes a lot of the issues of wrapping and
Yeah.
getting stuck into places it shouldn't be and setting things on fire or whatever, smoldering them out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Those sickle bars, how long are they? 9 foot, 10 foot? Where are they at on that?
Yeah, so we're just, I think it's, to be 100% accurate, I think it's 9 feet 3 inches, but we call it a 9 foot bar.
Okay.
And that seems to us to be sort of the happy place for making sure you don't have a piece of equipment that's, topply or, hard to run around corners and that kind of thing. And lets us keep the speed. So this unit's quite heavy. It's roughly 8,400 pounds. And so when you have, really long blades, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of weight out on that tip of the blade. So our focus is keeping a machine that's quite rigid. So for example, I can walk out to the end of our cutting arms, and there's no deflection on the blade where, I know
Oh, you can actually walk out on the blade itself?
yeah, I mean, I do
okay.
it just for
Just for
sake
show,
of show
yeah.
and tell, because I think people need to understand how, you can't put equipment in the field with this crop that is going to wuss out on you, basically. It's people have tried, conventional sickles and stuff like that, and they might work on a small scale here and there, but if you're talking hundreds and thousands of acres, this crop is no joke. It's going to eat your machine alive, right? So we really focus a lot on keeping the machine simple in its design and its mechanics, and making sure it's rugged enough to work.
Okay. Power requirements is PTO or what else?
Yeah, so
work?
it's a PTO driven machine, which is also quite nice. So it's just PTO off the tractor, and we suggest about 180 to 200 horse tractor, not for sake of needing the power necessarily, but because the machine is so heavy. We don't want people to be tearing up the rear end of their 3 point and doing any damage. We ourselves actually use a 150 horse tractor, but we have full control of our equipment. We're the ones using it, so we are okay with that, I guess.
Okay.
And perhaps the 3 point on our tractor might be a little heavier set than others. So we just sort of suggest that 180 to 200 horse sort of range. It uses a category 3 connection on the 3 or the 2 point of the balls.
Okay.
So that's sort of the general idea on that.
Yeah. So I saw this in action last summer out there. You did a demonstration of cutting some hemp, and if I remember correctly, this thing was moving at a pretty good clip. Can you talk about the speed at
Yeah.
which you can cut?
So we're on average around 10, I guess 10 miles an hour for you guys. And
But in Canadian, that's what, like 7 miles an hour?
no 16 kilometers an hour.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeah, so we that's sort of an average pace. I haven't really found the limit of it. It
Hmm.
doesn't seem to really stop. Density and size of material might change that, I guess. But um, we that so for the 9 foot bar, I guess some people want to see bigger bars, but I always say, what we make up in the a shorter bar, we make up in speed and agility around the field. So I mean, when you're clipping along, I mean, you're cutting a lot of hemp quick, even though it sounds like it's only 9 feet, right?
Mm.
So, yeah, it's a good pace.
Yeah. Okay. And are you the exclusive distributor of this cutter?
Yeah, so we've got the North American contract for selling this cutter, but frankly, we're kind of the sales support team for Lemetris. Myself and the fellow at Lemetris spend a lot of time talking and making sure we have helping customers all around the world. We've got obviously North America has a bunch. We've got a bunch in Australia, UK, Europe. So they're being well used, considering we really only started this prospect sort of in, I think, late 2020 or
I know it's been
2021.
such a short amount of time, right?
Yeah, and it was all COVID, so I kind of
Yeah.
blanked that time out of my mind. So yeah, it's really picked up, and I think people see the need, and the cost of the machine is just over 100,000 US, and but compared to what else is out there, I mean, one of the reasons we got behind it is we saw, there's the big double cut machines and stuff that Hemflax and Denagro and stuff have spent time developing, but those are big, expensive machines, and farmers aren't just going to take up this new industry and take a risk on that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So this is sort of 1/10 the cost, roughly speaking, and allows people that are looking to farm for fiber and really take this industry to the next level, gives them a chance to do that at a
Right.
reasonable cost. And even people that have changed their mind on projects or gone a different way, these units retain their value. There's just not enough of them around. So we keep producing more every year and sending more out, but there's
Excellent.
always a need. And there's always a last minute guy that calls me 2 weeks before harvesting 600 acres, asking if we've got one. So we're always happy to supply, and we do ask for about a 90 to 120 day lead time if possible. We've
Okay.
delivered them in 30 days, but just really depends on the queue and the build order that we're at.
Okay. I know the folks at I&D Hemp, they have, I think, a couple of these machines now. So that's cool.
Yeah, they had one of ours and one of a competitor's, and they were, I think, going to use that as a bit of a test as to which path they were going to take, and they ended up buying a second one of ours. So they really put ours through the paces. They did over, I think they said 2,200 acres
Wow.
last year, which is pretty amazing. We generally suggest, like, on average, a unit is roughly good for 1,000 acres a year, but you can obviously do more with that if you've got big acres. We're trying to be conservative. Land types aren't all the same throughout the country, right? So
Sure.
in British Columbia, obviously, we're dealing with a lot for smaller acres than, in the Midwest or the prairies, that are doing, 500 acres of hemp at a time.
Right. Right. Speaking of British Columbia, can you sort of tell me sort of like the hemp landscape up there? Like what's it like? What's hemp farming like in BC?
Yeah. Isn't there a song where it goes, so lonely? So in BC, it's probably a little bit, I think I'm probably one of the only ones in BC. There's a real good movement in Alberta of processors and farmers and stuff. So that's one province to the east of us.
Are you talking
Uh,
specifically for fiber?
for fiber and hemp, I mean, obviously there's the the cannabis side and marijuana side in BC. That seems to be
Right, but that's not what we're talking about.
No, exactly. But on the fiber and industrial hemp side, even for seed and grain, I'm gonna say I'm probably one of the few.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of unusual, I guess, that we're out there. We just got involved back in the early days with a town out of 100 Mile House that was doing a feasibility study if this stuff would grow in the north. And we were kind of the only ones that left that wanting to pursue the processing side of it. And we just forged ahead and spent a lot of time and looked at different mills and stuff, toured Europe and all that kind of good thing. And just kept plugging away at it without, a huge budget. So we've been sort of shoestringing it along and, hitting milestones every year, but, looking at the long game, right? So we're planning to be here for a while.
Okay. So Canada, you guys have been growing grain up there for what, 20, 30 years, since the 90s, from what I understand.
It was legal in 98. And then I would say, there have been some attempts to get the fiber industry going, but it just was never, I think it was just too early.
Yeah.
But obviously now there's just a real push with, climate change and, green economies and, local sustainability and all these kind of things, which I think are all very good, despite what you might think of any of those particular topics. But I think trying to get local and, producing things that aren't getting shipped all across the world is probably a good thing. So
yeah. For you, what is it about hemp? Like, what drew you in? What's keeping you interested?
Yeah, which is also kind of interesting. So I was in my late 20s, I guess, when I started, and I just saw our own family farm. Sort of where we are was very much hay country, and I just didn't see how we were going to add value to that. And we were looking at, could we do organic vegetables or anything like that? Somehow just went down the Google rabbit hole and came across hemp. I have no affinity to its brethren, but just really fell in love with all the things it can produce and what it can do from a material standpoint, and just kind of became curious. And like I said, that one town was doing a feasibility study, jumped in with that, and it just kept leading me to the next thing, and just really found an interest in it. Even just locally speaking, I don't know how it is in the US so much, but where we are, farms are dying. The next generation doesn't want to pick it up. It's boring. It doesn't have anything interesting. And we've also got quite a lumber and forestry industry where we are, which is also kind of dying and failing, just very slowly. So this sort of seemed like something that could pick up, economic development locally. So there's just a lot of reasons why it just kept taking me back to this being a good project.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the family farm. What's happening there now?
So basically, it was a hay farm, I guess. My dad came over in the late 70s with my mom and bought this piece of land. So
Where'd they come from? Where'd they come over
from? Germany.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he came over, thought that farming was going to be an idea of retirement. So, I think the European idea is you come to the free, open, wide landscapes and, the beautiful Rocky Mountains. So they came over. I was born on the family farm and, sort of traveled around. My background is in real estate. Which is another reason I was always trying to achieve the highest and best use of the land, and hay wasn't doing it for me. So I guess I just sort of pushed ahead on that and thought hemp would be a good alternative.
Okay. And so are you growing hemp exclusively now at the farm, or is it a diversified operation?
It's rotational. Yeah, it's rotational. We still have hayland, obviously. The hay side or the hemp side, sorry, is we're using different fields at different times, and also sort of stockpiling material for our processing line, which we've basically had to build and put together ourselves. And I call it a pilot plant, but it's not a bench top, it's a full scale operation. So we just actually doubled the size of our footprint. Our sort of idea of this is more of on a farm scale. That's how we started. For us in our area, and considering logistics and stuff like that, it seemed that was sort of the best approach.
Yeah.
And that's where we were headed. And, I guess I almost call our farm sort of a research farm, because we're kind of always playing around with different things and experimenting and seeing what different things do, or how that, changes on the processing side of things.
Right.
Back to the cutter, we've seen drastic improvements on processing time, because you can open a bale up in about half the time you could conventionally otherwise. So it's probably one of the best investments I think a processor could actually make, is buying one of these cutters. But
there you go.
Yeah.
Do you have animals on the farm?
We don't right now. We used to.
Okay.
Definitely something to be considered. It's all just a matter of time and where you can put all your energy and stuff.
Sure.
So.
Right. Well, I ask you that because, how we sort of got connected with this, that it was the fundraiser auction at the Hemp Summit last year, and you bid on and won this advertising package for Lancaster Farming Hemp podcast, and it was a fundraiser for the Hemp Feed Coalition. So
that's right.
I assume, obviously it makes sense that you are completely for hemp for livestock feed, because it's going to crack open the industry. So I wasn't sure if you were also producing grain for your animals on your farm.
No, haven't done that. So we're also, we don't grow for grain, I guess is probably worth mentioning too. Yeah. So when we started this, it was strictly fiber. Grain might have made sense, but we're not really grain country. It's
okay.
We're not equipped for that. And the fiber side was what was interesting us. So yeah, we grow for just fiber. Crop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so you have a decortication processing center there that you're building.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So decortication is such a fun word or thing to describe, but it's not one. I think some people think that it might just be one piece of equipment, but it's
many really, processes at the same time.
Yeah, many touch points, and I guess you're trying to do it in as little of touch points as possible, but yeah, so we sort of developed our own, because there wasn't a lot of other sort of processor guys that said they could build equipment. So we had to kind of do some of our own at that time. And we've added some pieces to the puzzle just for fiber cleaning stages further on down the line that are more conventional equipment. But we're going to be commissioning some of those this year and see what that turns out to. And just been sort of sending our material around a little bit locally, getting feedback and that kind of thing. And obviously the animal bedding market's quite large, and we've been able to sort of sustain ourselves with that kind of stuff as well.
Okay. And I imagine one of your goals is to get other local farmers interested in growing hemp for you, and you being the central processing point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the end goal. We actually have done that already 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. We had a couple farmers involved in growing hemp, and just sort of see the logistics of how that would work and see what the engagement was like in our community. And I think the long story is, if farmers are paid well and fairly, frankly, they'll be happy to grow it. There's a lot of reasons to be growing it, from an agronomy point of view, to also just a simplicity sake to some degree. Every time I tell the hay farmers locally that I don't care if it rains on the crop when it's on the ground, their eyes open up quite wide. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, through efficiency and just crop diversification, that I think this makes a great addition to a farmer's seasonal goals.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that whole idea, the model of having, small localized processors that area farmers can come sort of build that local supply chain. That's just what needs to happen. I've been watching that happen in Kansas, the folks at South Bend, Kansas, that's kind of what they're doing. They've got their neighbor farms now growing for them. So yeah, it's fantastic. So I applaud you and your family, and it's great to hear about what you're doing up there.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully sharing the good word. And it's growing so fast, and it's great to see. Even in the U.S., you guys are just way more entrepreneurial than us Canadians. So,
but you folks are more polite than we are, I think, right? And that
well, that's pretty kind.
Yeah, I think that says something.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's great to talk to you again, Peter. Thank you for joining me here. Is there? Well, I guess we should let the people know where they can learn more about your operation.
Yeah, sure. So there's basically two websites for our processing side. It's forevergreen.com, and for the cutter, it's hempcutter.com.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'll put those links on the show page for this episode.
Perfect.
And people can check them out. Well, here in the U.S., we've got a bunch of different competing hemp advocacy groups. What's that like in Canada? Are you part of any groups up there?
Yeah, so I'm actually one of the directors of the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance. So I've been on that board now this is the second year.
Okay.
And was definitely a great starting point when we first got introduced to hemp and wanted to learn more. They've been an organization that's been around for a really long time. A lot of knowledgeable people, a lot of research. So yeah, I definitely encourage anybody that's sort of thinking about hemp or wants to learn more or wants to engage and see what we've been doing up in Canada, to check out the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance.
Okay, I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode too.
Yeah, perfect. No, that'd be great.
Cool.
Yeah, no, really appreciate your time, Eric, and it was nice chatting with you and having a good conversation. I love it.
Likewise. Thank you. All right, there you go. Peter Dushop from Forever Green up there in British Columbia. Check them out at hempcutter.com or go over to lancasterfarming.com for the show page for this episode and click on all the links there. Okay, well, that does it for me today. It's time to go. I got to get out of here. Thank you for listening. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper. I almost said senior digital editor, but that's not official yet. So anyway, lots of good stuff happening here. Thank you so much for listening. You can always get in touch with me by email at podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or you want to call me up and leave me a voicemail, please do, 717-721-4462. All right, thanks again for listening, and until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Herlock, and the music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.